yo, what up, what up, what up, everybody? Season 3 is your man, Dame D and YDC, host of the Two Mics Up podcast. Man, back again for another ride. I'm excited. Man, there's a lot of things going on that I just can't really wait to jump into tonight. Our guests, uh, we're working through everything with this crazy pandemic. That'll be a whole nother topic for another show. I really want to start out by saying, tonight's show, it's really about, show me the money. And before I can even bring in our guests, man, Two Mics Up wants to really thank our sponsors, because they've been really a huge part in our development and growth. All new, a whole new layout, whole new design, with our marketing and branding team. We want to thank our platinum sponsors, TD3 Insurance, Bubbles and Brews Philly, Riddick Entertainment. Thank you guys so much for rocking with us again for another season. And I just want to take a minute to, I want to shout out to JMI Income Tax, Jennifer. She just jumped on board as a premier sponsor. The growth just continues, ladies and gentlemen. And like I said, it's really all about the money sometimes. We need that money to be able to go ahead and, pay our bills, pay our mortgage, car note, to splurge, to enjoy things, to run our businesses. And really tonight, if you're a nonprofit, if you're a person out there that sometimes you sit around and you try to figure out with your team and team meetings, because I know I went through it, and you kind of feel like,
I need the money, Jerry! Show me the money! Jerry, you better yell! Show me the money! Show me the money!
okay, so with that being said, I've been down that road. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to introduce to you all tonight's guest. My brother, my man, Mark Duncan, the fundraising coach. Yo, this gentleman right here, I've seen, I've watched, I was blown away. I'm excited to have him join us tonight. Mark, I'm gonna be quiet. Could you just take, a couple of minutes, man, and introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Absolutely. And Dave, I want to thank you for having me on tonight. I'm thrilled to be here. I am Mark Duncan. I work for the Fund Coach. I am the Fund Coach. And what I do is I work with nonprofit leaders to help them master the skill of relationship fundraising and to overcome any fear that they have of asking for money.
Mm.
And so I do that primarily through one-on-one coaching with my clients. And we talk about the very, very importance of relationship fundraising, and as we work together. I've been in the nonprofit space for 34 years.
Wow.
23 of those years I've spent in direct fundraising, managed multi-million dollar capital campaigns for universities and other nonprofits. And I'm one of those weird people that loves asking people for money, and now I love teaching people how to ask people for money. So that's me and what I do.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I really want you to hear what this gentleman is talking about. Not having a fear to ask for money. And I think that's really important tonight, for those of you in the nonprofit sector. And even someone like myself, not in a nonprofit, but there's always something that you can learn, because I think, Mark, and tell me if I'm wrong, a lot of us really do have a huge fear of going out and campaigning. I call it campaigning, but campaigning and asking other folks, businesses, family, friends, whoever it is, for money. And you know, really, how did you, early on, begin to master your craft
Mm.
and kind of develop your craft?
I guess this was an innate thing for me. I had to get out of my own way.
Mm.
First, let me back up a little bit. So, long time ago, I was working for a nonprofit, and as the program director. So I was not doing fundraising, and the executive director said that we're going to launch a capital campaign. This was back in 1996. I said, a capital campaign. I said, what's capital campaign?
Right.
He said, well, we're going to actually go out and we're going to raise about, at this time, it was $1.2 million. And we're going to, build a new facility, renovate this facility. And we're going to actually go out and talk to people and ask them to give money. And at that moment, it was like a light switch went off. And I said, wait a minute, you're telling me you're actually going to go out and talk to folks and ask them to support, this,
Mhm.
give us money without anything. I said, yes. And that was really the first time I had ever heard about fundraising in that way.
Mhm.
And so the next question that I had for my boss was, "Oh, wow, can I help?" And he looked at me and rightfully said, "No, you can't."
Mhm.
uh, and it was because of the role that I played. I had enough on my plate.
Mhm.
This was when I worked in outdoor ministry at a camp and conference center in northern New Jersey, called Johnsonburg Presbyterian Center. Shout out to them. A big part of my life growing up. Um, and so I had to continue to do my job and sort of watch from afar what it was that they were trying to do, but it piqued my interest.
Mhm.
And so I said, "This is it." And I said, "This is what I want to do." I
Right.
said, "Now, how am I going to put myself in a position to get there?" And so, fortunately, a an executive director position became open at another camp in another part of the country down in Maryland. And so I applied for that job and I got it. And they had only been raising a couple $1,000s a year just through direct mail.
Mhm.
So I thought, well, there's nowhere to go but up, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I got there. The first year I raised $20,000. One of
Wow.
them was a $10,000 ask.
Okay.
Um, Next year I raised 40, and then the following year I raised about $190,000. And
Wow.
that's when I realized I love fundraising. Right. And not because of the money, right? And this is kind of, you know, to the point you were making earlier about the fear, because it's never ever about the dollars. It's always about what the dollars do for the people that you serve.
Right.
And so that
Right.
has got to be what what is, in your mind and what you're thinking about as you're talking to
Mhm.
people about giving. It's not about you,
Right.
right? Not about you. I remember when I was in higher education, I used to get so frustrated. I would be on the phone calling alumni, trying to get them to meet with me. And although they either didn't answer the phone or I got their answering machine. That's how far back I go. And so I would just get frustrated. And I every now and then would get up and just walk outside, right? And just watch
Mhm.
the students walking by. And I knew that the university I worked at, many of those students were first generation students that were there on scholarship.
Right.
So I needed a reminder of the mission, right? I had to
Mhm.
get up and I would go back and sit down and make those calls again because it wasn't about me, right?
Right.
It wasn't about it. So that's one of the things that I talk with folks about is you got to focus on the mission. You got to talk about why people are giving,
Yep.
and how it's going to impact lives. Because every nonprofit, and mostly every company, but primarily every
Mhm.
nonprofit exists to solve a problem,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
you need resources to solve that problem.
Yes.
And so that has got to be top of mind when you are working with folks, talking to them about supporting your organization.
I love it because you really touched on a lot of things. Like I said, and I never really thought of it in such those terms, but it's true. Our platform here really is to serve a purpose. And we
Hmm.
talk about it, educating, empowering, impacting our community positively by doing shows such as this, having such great guests and speakers like yourself come on to educate so many of us that, the black and brown community, especially, that really don't have access to mediums or services such as this. And you're so right, and the big thing, and I want to ask, because you mentioned something very the ask
Hmm.
and for me, I agree with you. It's not about asking for how much, but it's just knowing that what it does. Because I've seen in our short time here, just the growth and development of those who really see the service, how it's helped what we've developed. And how do you really then, because like you say, you deal one on one, how do
Hmm.
you really help someone develop, first of all, that ask or that step or that process to create that ask?
Sure. So I walk my folks through a process,
Hmm.
and it's a well-known process in major gifts fundraising. Like I said, I call it relationship fundraising, and that is something called moves management. And
Hmm.
so I actually, when I work with my clients, I train. There's a training portion early on in the process where I talk about the process that you have to go through to take a donor from the very beginning of the relationship
Hmm.
to the point where you're actually asking and then stewarding that relationship. And so I walk them through what I call 5 moves. Okay.
Okay.
And so the first move, it's a combined move, and that's identification and qualification. And
Mm.
so, what does that mean? You've got to find the right people. Now, this is not to discount those folks who don't have significant means.
Hmm.
Everybody can be a donor,
Yes.
and all nonprofit organizations should be doing some form of mass solicitation, whether it's direct mail, e-solicitation, a combination of both, uh, phone-a-thon, I know that's old school,
Hmm.
um, or social media, that crowdsourcing.
Right.
That's where you're soliciting the masses. But from that, and I'm going to talk about boards too in a moment. But from that, you should be looking to identify and qualify people who have capacity. Now, some of that information you'll know just based on anecdotal information, right?
Hmm.
You know that this person has capacity, but there are also tools out there that allow you to do wealth screening. You have to pay for those tools, but they are very, very valuable because what it does is that it allows you to screen those folks who are who are constituents of yours to find out where the capacity is
Hmm.
so that you can focus your time wisely. So that's part of the identification qualification process. Next step is discovery, right?
Hmm.
So that's the first visit, that first interaction with that person. Now, if you don't know that person and you pick up the phone and call them, the likelihood of them meeting with you is going to be pretty slim.
Hmm.
So that's why it's important for you to either be introduced or have some sort of warm handoff. And this is where boards come in. They can be wonderful in terms of door opening for you, people that they know that have
Hmm.
capacity and introducing you to them, and then you take it from there. But that discovery visit is that first opportunity to talk to the prospect or donor, talk about the organization, but it's more important to listen,
Hmm.
right? So that you understand what's important to them. This is all part of building the relationship. And so I always say, do not ask on the first visit. This
Hmm.
is a series of steps before you
Okay.
actually get to that ask.
Got you.
So you're going to have that discovery conversation. You're going to talk with them. You're going to learn, what are the things that are important to them? What do they like? Even their personal hobbies, those kinds of things, because that's going to be very helpful
Hmm.
down the road. So once
Okay.
you get through that first visit, that first discussion, that discovery phase, then you move into the next phase, which is cultivation.
Hmm.
Now, that can take a long period of time, it can take a short period of time.
Right.
It really all depends on the actual donor.
Hmm.
And so, what do I mean by that? I always use this analogy that when we're working with individual prospects, we have to see ourselves as the GPS versus the
Hmm.
driver, right?
Got you. Got you.
So the donor is the driver. We are the GPS. Okay. So what happens when you're driving your car, someone's driving the car, and they turn left, but the GPS says for them to go straight? What does the GPS do?
Hmm. It reroutes
It,
you.
it reroutes, it
Hmm.
course corrects. But what is it focused on? It's focused on the destination.
Destination. Hmm.
Right. And so it's our job as fundraisers to allow the donor to take us in different directions as long as we do not lose sight of the destination, which is
Right.
asking getting the gift. And so what I mean by that is you're going to have times where um, donors are going to talk about things that are really not part of the conversation, and you're going to have to follow with them.
Hmm.
Or they may express interest in something specific about your organization that you weren't aware of, and so now you're gonna veer that way, but you're always going to stay focused on the actual gift itself. So again, that can take as little or as long as it takes. Don't drag your feet. Don't just let that play out, because that
Right.
means you're evading the obvious
Obvious.
or
Right.
avoiding the obvious,
Right.
which is the next step, and that is the solicitation, the ask itself.
Got you.
And so that there's a particular, um, I won't call it a formula, but it's a process
Mm-hmm.
that most people, when they ask for money, don't think of it in the terms that I typically
Right.
teach it.
Right.
First of all, it's real important that you be specific.
Mm-hmm.
You want to look someone in the eye and you want to ask them for the exact amount of money that you would like to get from them.
Mm-hmm.
Not a range or, hey, I hope you will support us, but you look them in the eye. And if you're going to make an ask, you're going to ask them for a specific amount, whether it's 5,000, 10,000, whatever that number is.
Right.
And then right after you make that ask, you're going to shut your mouth, right?
Mm.
And the reason I say that, and I emphasize this, specifically with the folks I work with, because asking for money is nerve wracking, right?
Right.
We get anxious, we get nervous, and sometimes when we're nervous, if we're not cognizant of what's happening, we tend to act in ways that we shouldn't. So if you're going to ask, be specific, and then be quiet. Because sometimes we have a tendency to just keep talking, and what
Right.
happens is the ask gets lost.
Talk
So
yourself
let
right
it
out of it, basically.
exactly. That's
Mm-hmm.
exactly right. That's
Mm-hmm.
exactly right. So you look someone in the eye and you say, we're, thank you for taking time to meet with me, and as you know, we have been working toward raising dollars to support our annual operations, and I was hoping that you would be willing to make a gift of $15,000 to support our organization.
Mm.
Boom. That's it. And as
Wow.
uncomfortable as that dead air may be, you got to let that lie
Got
there.
that.
They have to speak next.
Right.
They have to speak next. And they're going to give you one of three answers. They're going to say yes, which sometimes when they say yes, there's things that can go wrong there.
Right.
Talk about that. They may say no, but it's rare that happens. If you've done your homework and you've built this relationship, it's
Mm-hmm.
very rare that you'll get a no. You may
Right.
get, I can't do that much, but I can do this,
Right.
but you may not get a no. And then the other is, I need time to think about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there are pieces of this that you can't just let go. I can't tell you how many times in my career I've had staff of mine come back to the office and say, they said yes. and I've looked at them and I said, okay, well, that's great. What are the details? What are the next steps? And they were so excited about the
They
yes,
forgot. Yeah.
they forgot to close the
The
deal.
D. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, so when you get a yes, the next thing you say is thank you so
Mm-hmm.
much for willing to do this. How would you like to go about making this gift? Got to
Right.
ask that question.
Right.
And then you start getting into the details of, I can do a check. Do you want to pledge it over time? So somebody may be committing to a $10,000 gift, but wants to do it 2,000 a year, or over 5 years. You got to
Right.
work all those details out. That's
Right.
really important. I always say, I had a wonderful boss when I was in higher education. He's a fantastic golfer, still a mentor of mine to this day, and such a good golfer that people would come to him, anytime they played golf, they would come to him with a story. It didn't matter if they
Mm-hmm.
were playing with him or anybody else,
Right.
and they would
Right.
always talk about their drive. Oh, you should have seen it. I drove it 300 yards off the tee. And my boss, whose name, my former boss and current mentor, whose name is Jerry, would say, well, that's great. Did you make the putt?
Right. Did you sink it in the hole? Did
Did
you
you
get it in the
make
hole?
the putt?
Yeah.
Right. It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You come back with a yes, and did you close the
The
deal?
deal.
Right.
Yeah.
So sometimes we get caught up in that. If someone says, the next question that you ask, and I can't tell you how many times this gets sort of, you lose control.
Mm-hmm.
The next question you have to ask is, when would be a good time to follow up?
Right. Right.
Because I can't tell you how many times, well, yeah, let me think about it. I'll get back to you in a couple of weeks. And
Mm-hmm.
people walk away from that. And guess what? You've now lost control of the whole process.
Right.
Because
And
now
then,
you're waiting for them to get back to you in a couple of weeks go by. And now you're going,
right.
well, should I call them? I don't want to feel, I don't want to appear to be a pest, but if you ask the question, when would be a good time to follow up? And they say a couple of weeks, then you say, well, great. How about I give you a call 2 weeks from today at around 2 o'clock? Would
Right.
that work for
Right.
you? Great.
Right.
Now it's on you.
You.
You have
Yeah.
to be in control of every move. And
Hmm.
so now it's on you to follow up and check back in. That does two things. One, obviously you ask them permission for their how much time they need, and then you nail that down. But the second thing that does is it creates an arbitrary deadline.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
person just committed to making a decision in two
Right.
weeks.
Yeah. That's a very good point.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a committal that I mean, from I'm gonna go back to the old school. That was a Jedi move. You just it's Jedi them into having to commit. Like
that's right.
like they really have no choice to really jump in. And I just want to ask, and ladies and gentlemen, I see some, if you're, here, if you're watching through someone else's stream, please, if you have any comments, please go ahead, jump right in, drop your comments. We'll go ahead and discuss them as we're going along. And I want to go back to uh Gabrielle. I think this is a great question because I've had this conversation too before with other people, and I mean, I'm not going to lie, personally, and, the word assume and assumption is a terrible thing, but for many of us, we do believe that getting grants is easier than finding people with money. What have you found that to be like, in your experience, Mark?
It is it for startup nonprofits particularly. It is the first place they go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I always say use grants to launch, but use individual gifts to sustain. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's nothing wrong with you looking for grant support, but it isn't sustainable if that's the only support that you're looking for. And I know there are a lot of startup nonprofits out there that will do that. Oh, I got to get a grant. I've got to get a grant. And
Right.
so they're spending so much time with their heads down in
Mm.
an application instead of their heads up looking for people to talk to.
Mm.
And so, and again, there's nothing wrong with grants. I'm a big proponent of them, but you should also be treating grants like you would a major donor.
Mm.
So many times people will, oh, I gotta look for a grant. Oh, I found an application. They go in and they fill out the application. And then the challenge with that is they fill out the application and they submit and they haven't talked to a single soul at the foundation.
Wow. Wow.
So my advice to folks is before you apply, pick up the phone and call whether the president of the foundation or program officer, introduce yourself and ask them some questions about the application, right? Now you're beginning to build a relationship and a rapport. And I suggest you do that a couple of times. You do that at the beginning. You do it in the middle of you filling out the application. You may have a couple of other questions. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. That does a couple of things. You're getting questions answered instead of guessing,
Mm-hmm.
but you're also, now you're creating a memory in
Yeah.
that. Oh yeah. So now if that person is at the table after you submit, and they're with a board, and the board is reviewing the applications, now the program officer or the executive director or the president of the foundation can answer questions about your application much more directly than they can about others.
Right.
So they say, hey, well, they'll say, well, you know what? I talked to Dane. Dane called me,
Mm-hmm.
um, and we had a nice conversation, and so he's going to know or she's going to know more about your organization, and actually becomes an advocate without even realizing it because
Right.
you took the time to build that relationship. So grants are great. Use them to launch. Use individual gifts to sustain.
You said some key things in there that just kind of raised my antenna because I think we talked off air about how things have changed, digitally, where we don't really a lot of times, and I just want to be kind and saying this, like people don't really relate anymore personally. And like you just said there, like for me, I've been blessed. So my relationships in building this have been personal, like people I've been able to be around and have conversation with. And like you said, they become uh, a spokesperson, 4 2 mics up, and I'm a spokesperson like my sponsors. I'll talk about Riddick Entertainment all day long. I'll talk about TD3 because it's natural,
Hmm.
because it's a part of my network and people I've related with. But with social media now in the digital age, I find sometimes it's harder to make that connection with people. Do you find that the same? And if so, like, how do you break down that barrier?
So I think some of that really is generational, right? So you know, and I'm going to assume that we're probably about the same age. We knew what life was like before all this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's innate or natural for us to connect that way. I do think that we're spending so much time um, typing and connecting through text
Mm-hmm.
that it does take away from that. Uh, so my thing is that the very first thing you do, first of all, I'm not a big fan of of email and as a first point of contact.
Mm-hmm.
Pick up the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Pick up the phone. Place a call. If you get their voicemail, leave a voicemail, but then follow up with an email. Say, hey, just try to give you a call. If you're just trying to use those tools as a way to get to the point where you're actually having a conversation. Don't use those tools as a means to have the overall conversation because some people will think, oh, I'll just send them an email and ask them
Mm-hmm.
for a gift,
Mm-hmm. Right.
and we make decisions. I think from two points of view, or I always say two different languages.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it comes from how we feel and our emotions. So you have to know what language you're speaking to those donors.
Right.
Do they make decisions from how they feel?
Mm.
And if they do, then you need to be talking about the things about your mission that connect with that emotion.
Yeah.
If they're more cerebral in
Mm-hmm.
their decision making, then you're going to be talking about the sustainability of your organization, the financial management, the long range plan. Those are the things that are going to resonate with the cerebral decision makers. And so you're not going to know that language in the digital world. You're going to know that by looking somebody in the eye and inflection and body language and all of those things. That is never going to change. I don't know anybody that's ever purchased a home over
Hmm.
the internet, right?
Right.
Right.
Right. Right.
You know, you,
No
you may
facts.
you may right, but you may find the house that you want. But guess what? You're gonna connect with a real estate agent, and you're gonna have a conversation with them, and they're gonna shepherd you through that process. And I don't
Mm.
think that's ever going to change.
No.
I
No.
don't. No amount of social media or the digital age advancing, other than perhaps what we're doing right now. I mean, you and I are face to face, and particularly through the pandemic.
Right.
Working with
Right.
folks, as it relates to fundraising. At the very beginning of the pandemic, I said, "Ugh, I don't think it's a good idea for you to be using Zoom or any of the other video conferencing platforms to solicit." But as we got 6, 8 months into the pandemic, this became such a norm. I was like,
Norm.
okay, let's do that. It's okay because you can still see, you can still connect. Most of my clients, I'm going to say all except for 2 or 3 of my clients, I've never met personally. I
Oh
work
wow.
with them like this. I have clients in 13 different states.
Mm-hmm.
We connect through Zoom an hour a week, and it works because they can
Mm-hmm.
see my facial expressions. I can share my screen. I can do a whole host of
Right.
things. But and so this tool has been helpful to at least help
Connect.
us connect.
Connect. Yeah.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
without staring at text. But I still think that this sort of face to face, whether it be virtual or actually in person, is really going to be the only way that big decisions
Get made.
related to big asks get made.
I'll agree
So
with that, and that's why I wanted that, because I find the same thing. I've been able to conduct a lot more business in our off season and during down times and different times this way, and it really gives you a feel. This is the closest thing to being in person. At least I can read your eyes, I can read your body language.
Right.
I can hear, that hmm, so you still get all of that aspect, and it's really important that you brought up some great things, and I hope everybody's really, if you're watching this, you're really picking up on some of these gems and nuggets that are being dropped. Just understanding the ask, the read, to get the feel for the person. Because I learned the hard way too on something that you said. So me, I'm a little more of a cerebral type person.
Mhm.
But I had a person that was sponsoring and broke me down at my knees because I'm thinking this way. But this person was very passionate and cerebral. So
Mhm.
my game plan was only one way. I was driving down a one way street. I couldn't back up, reverse, make a U turn, nothing. And through the and I thanked her, but thanks to my wife being there, she was like, "See, that'll learn you." And
Mhm.
again though, by having conversations and being around great people, this is how you build your network, you build your product, your service, and I just want to ask before we go kind of into a quick break.
Sure.
You know, what was maybe your biggest issue that you found early on, or maybe that you even still deal with today, that you have trouble with when it comes to raising funds? Like, what is that one obstacle?
So there are a couple, and back when I was actively soliciting, when I was working for nonprofit organizations, one of the biggest challenges I had was bringing the board along or bringing the CEO along.
Mm,
And so what I mean by that is I would walk into an organization and I would suggest how we should move forward with either building a relationship or connecting with someone. And there has been some resistance. So I've dealt with resistance has probably been my biggest
mm,
challenge, and my biggest challenge has been internal and not external, right?
ah,
So my former boss and my mentor always used to say the job is harder internally as it is externally,
mm,
and so we get mired in whatever jockeying we do or politics or whatever it is that's getting in the way, and we're allowing that to impede progress. And
mhm,
so getting buy-in, bringing people along so that they understand that this process actually works. One of the biggest challenges that I had was getting board members to introduce me to their friends who had money.
mm.
And I would ask them to do that.
Mhm,
Um, who do you know? Who should I be talking to? Um, and so and I'll go here because I wanted to emphasize this as it relates to boards. And this is really for startup nonprofits and existing nonprofits, but definitely for startup nonprofits. You are starting a nonprofit organization. You really need to be very, very cognizant about who you're asking to be on your board. A
mm,
lot of times, nonprofits will, oh, I'm going to grab this person, and they grab what's comfortable,
mm,
and they're not strategically thinking about the long term.
mm.
And so you have to be thinking about, and I call them these the four C's. So people who you ask to be on your board should, first of all, care about your organization and its mission
Mhm,
very, very deeply. But they should also have capacity, right? They
mm.
should be able to give in a significant way. They don't all need to be wealthy,
Right.
but they should have capacity to give in a significant way. Third, they should be connected to people who have
Mhm,
capacity.
mhm.
And fourth, they should be comfortable introducing you to people
See
they
you.
know that have capacity, right?
Mhm, mhm,
And I know people, oh my God, you sounds like the board is doing so much fundraising. Boards primarily have three areas of responsibility, right? They are keepers and ambassadors of the mission, right? They're the ones that are out communicating to the general public, about the organization. They have fiduciary responsibility over the organization, so make sure that the money is going where it's supposed to be going, and long range planning around finances. And they're also responsible for resource development, which is another word for fundraising.
mm,
And that doesn't mean they have to ask. but it certainly would be great if they door opened and connected you with people who have capacity
Hmm.
and do what I call a warm handoff so
Right.
that the executive director can take it from there, build the relationship, make the ask, and close the deal.
Man, look, ladies and gentlemen, look, if y'all listening, man, and some of you I see, you might be here in the woods and everything. I hope you got a notebook, or I hope you go back and watch this because these are some real nuggets. This is sensational right here, as far as I'm concerned. Straight sensational information that's being shared, with everybody. And man, I'm really sitting here, when I go behind screen, I'm kind of sitting here like, whoa, really? I mean, it's really mind blowing for me. So I hope everyone is enjoying this. And while we're at it, I'm going to go ahead and take a pause for the cause, and run some new ads for our. All right, everybody, and we're back from the break. And I'm here tonight with an amazing guest, Mr. Mark Duncan, the fun coach, CEO, founder. This gentleman, man, look, y'all have, if you're going to come in now, make sure when this is over, that you go back, you start from the beginning because you really missed a lot of gems, a lot of nuggets. And, while I was sitting here, through the break, I had another, thought just to kind of maybe help some folks, and kind of show us how, as briefly, but with some detail, if you could, the process of how it works. Like, let's say I'm a potential donor and you're requesting a donation. Like, what does that visual look like? And kind of get some of our nonprofit heads, an idea of what some tips or things that they should be doing in that process.
So I do this role playing all the time,
Okay.
and you and I have not talked about
No.
exactly how this is going to go. I always do these on the fly, but let's act as if you are a donor.
Okay.
Let's assume that we have worked through that whole process that I described earlier. So I've, I've identified you, I've qualified you, we've had discovery visits, cultivation, and now I'm about to make the ask.
Okay.
And so this is what that would look like, and we'll start right now.
Okay.
Hey, Dame, I want to thank you. First of all, how are you doing?
And I'm doing great today, man, and just
Good,
living a
good.
life. How about you, Mark?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for asking. Let me thank you for the amount of time you've taken to spend with me to learn about our organization and the good work that we do for our folks. And as you know, we have been working very diligently. We have a goal of raising about $100,000 this year to support the bottom line of our organization. And as you know, we have to do that through philanthropy, through fundraising. And so, what I would like to ask you, Dane, is if you would be willing to make a gift to support our annual operations um, with a gift of $10,000.
Hmm. Wow. Man, Mark, I really love, everything about what you're doing. But really right now at this moment, I might have to take some time to think about, you know, that amount. We're kind of transitioning and new fiscal year is about to start, so we might really have to sit down and look at our books. And but I'll have to think about it. And let me get back to you.
Okay, I appreciate that very much. And first, let me thank you for at least considering it.
Hmm.
Let me ask you this: when would be a good time to follow up with you?
Mm. Uh, it's going to be a minute. Can't really put a specific time on it. I have to go back, sit down, talk with the team, kind of go over the details that you provided with me, and it's going to take a little bit. You're going to give me a couple of weeks.
Okay, okay. So, well, 2 weeks from today would be October 14th. So it's 2 weeks. That Thursday. What does that Thursday look like for you at around 3:30? You available at that time?
Mm, uh, Generally Thursdays, we have a lot of internal meetings and things of that. We might we'll probably have to push that back to another day, maybe
Okay.
a week or so after that.
Okay. So that would take us to the 21st. What does that day look like for you?
Right now, looks like in the afternoon, sometime in the afternoon, 3:30, 4 o'clock might be doable for me.
Okay. Oh, well, why don't I give you a call at 4 o'clock? And if you don't mind, Dame, I will email you a calendar invitation for that time, just so you can reserve that on your calendar. Would you be okay with that?
Sure, not a problem at all, Mark. I think I can work with that. Not a problem.
Okay, fantastic. I will do that, and I look forward to talking to you in 3 weeks.
I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. And usually I go in scene, right? And then,
No, I mean that's awesome. I mean, I just really want those who are watching and paying attention or listening, taking notes, to be able to see. And you can tell that you've been doing this for a while. That was very natural for you. And you have me, I think I'm a pretty good. Sometimes you have to deflect,
right,
but those
right,
questions were really they weren't open ended.
yeah,
They were either yes or no, either you
yeah,
can or you can't.
right.
And really, when I tried to push it back or push it off, and thinking that I had the upper hand, you still kept the foot on the gas.
I gotta stay focused on the destination. And so the only
Mm,
way, because if I had just said, oh, and let it go at that sort of loose 3 weeks from now, I have no anchor, right, to follow up with you on. And so now we have a 4 o'clock meeting scheduled for 3 weeks from now. I've sent you, a calendar request, so it's on your calendar. Now you're like, oh, I better have an answer for him
hmm
by that time because I know he's going to be calling me, and I committed to that, literally committed to that. And so, the next step is to continue that conversation. Hopefully, you have decided. You may say yes. You may ask me questions about, um, well, I can't do 10 all at once. Can I split it up? I will work with you, and I talk to my clients about working with their donors to make it work for for their donors, right? And
mm-hmm.
so that's really important to close that deal so that it's crystal clear when you walk away what the next step is. And then the final step, because of course I know I said five steps, right?
Hmm.
The fifth step after you close the deal is stewardship. Now, this is really, really important. And stewardship is another way of saying thank you, right?
Hmm.
So you say thank you, initially. You're going to send a letter, a formal letter, um, asking, asking people to, or not asking, send a formal letter to thank them again. But you're going to stay in touch with them,
Hmm.
right? This is the problem that also happens. Some people get a big gift, they get it, and then they don't see that donor
Yeah,
for until it's time to ask them again.
they wipe their hands of it, not and
Exactly.
don't keep that connection going.
That's right. This is a relationship that you have to sustain.
Hmm.
And so the stewardship process is really just another word for cultivation. You're
Mm.
shifting from stewardship, and stewardship could be bringing them back to your organization, show
Right.
them how their dollars have impacted the lives of the people that you're serving, sending them pictures. If they gave money to build something,
Hmm.
send them periodic pictures of the progress that's being made. Here, I just want to give you an update on where we are with this. Thank you again for your gift. It's another opportunity to thank them. And then you shift back into cultivation where you're continuing to stay in touch with them. Because guess what? Next year, you're going to ask them again,
Right.
right?
And you
And
got
and if you duck out and then dip back in a year from now, that's going to be a problem. But
mm,
if you sustain that relationship, that ask will come naturally. And sometimes it's, hey, would you be willing to do the same thing you did last year? Oh, absolutely. Put me down.
right.
Then it becomes more casual.
Yep.
And this is how it's done. This is what colleges and universities have been doing for decades. This is what healthcare has been doing for decades. And I worked in both of those spaces. The reason why I do this is because not enough of other nonprofits understand the value of relationship fundraising.
Hmm.
And so this is my mission. Like my mission is
Man.
not about, I just want to empower as many people as possible with the tools to be good at this, not because they can raise a lot of money, but all the lives that they can
You
change from the
change.
money they raise, right? That's what's
Mm.
important.
Man, look here. All I'm gonna say is, man, that right there, that right there is powerful, man. And I'm going to go back because that was a great question, from Gabrielle. You know, because some people may be sitting there. I know sometimes people are scared to ask questions. But what would you say, Mark, is the best way to determine someone's capacity? And that's a great question, Gabrielle. Thank you for asking.
So there's a number of ways that you can do it very anecdotally. Again, I go back to the board, right? I always say you should ask everyone on your board to give you 5 names of people that they know personally that have capacity. Now, they're not just going to hand those names to you, right? You're going to sit down with each board member and have a strategy conversation about how the introduction is going to go. So then you're not just going to give them names and you're going to start calling because they don't know who you are. So
Mm-hmm.
the board member becomes the conduit between you and those new prospects. And that board member already knows the capacity that they have. So that's one way. That's
Mm-hmm.
the inexpensive way.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way that is right at your fingertips. But there are other ways as well. And so there are services that are called wealth screening services. And so there are lots of companies out there that do this. There's one in particular that I love working with, and that is Windfall Data.
Mm-hmm.
They are fantastic. What they do is they're able to take a database of from a nonprofit, as long as you have first name, last name, and address, and they can screen it through a process. And what it will tell you is of those people, how many of those folks have a net worth of 1 million or more, right? And so when you have that
Say
kind of
what?
information, now you know whose door to knock on or who you need to talk to, right?
Mm-hmm.
It allows you to be more strategic.
Hmm.
There are other screening services out there that will give you sort of ratings and give you a sense of what their not their capacity, but the things that they like to support. And the one I was just talking about does this as well, but it's very, very accurate. Many of my clients have used it and have had great success.
Hmm.
One client in particular had a donor base of about 15,000, and 4,100 people came back with a net worth of 1 million or more.
Ooh.
4,100 people. And
Ooh.
so now, that was overwhelming for them. It's like, oh wow. But there were
Yeah.
people but there were people that they knew, right? There were people that they knew
Mm.
that didn't know, but they didn't know they had that kind of wealth. So it changes how you interact with them. It changes what you do when you're in front of them. Not that you're going to be standing around and asking for money, but you know that you need to spend more time with them to develop that relationship, that ultimately leads to an ask.
Wow.
Um,
So
so, so
I
does
mean,
the economy? I see the question on the
mm-hmm,
screen. Does the
mm-hmm.
economy affect the ask? Um, so I ran a campaign for a university that overlapped the 2008 crash, right? Crash is probably not a good term, but we all know what happened in
Right, right,
2008.
right.
And so, in that campaign, it just went longer, but the goal for that campaign was 60 million.
Oh, shit.
Now, I
How
had
much did
moved,
you
I
say? I'm
had
sorry, Mark. You had broke up a little bit.
$60 million
Okay.
was
All
the
right.
was the goal of the campaign.
Mm.
And so it took a little bit longer. I started the campaign, I oversaw the campaign. I got it to about $44 million, and then I was recruited away to another organization. But that university wound up raising $88 million uh, in the middle of that economy. $22 million over goal.
Wow.
$22 million over goal in the middle of that horrible. So the economy doesn't affect the ask. It's really about the person's personal situation.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't look at the economy and say, okay, well, because the economy's down, I'm going to change how much I'm going to ask this person for.
Hmm.
Mm-mm. Because if you haven't built a relationship with them to have a better understanding about where they are personally, because they're going to tell you that. They're
Right.
going to tell you, oh yeah, I got. You be surprised. Oh, I really took a hit. You'll get cues, like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are some folks that did not impact them because their money wasn't tied up in the stock market. And so, um, that it's not the economy that dictates the ask. It's the personal relationship and the personal situation of that donor.
Mm-hmm. Well, well, look, I'm loving the questions. I'm because right now I'm just letting the audience and the listeners and the viewers just go ahead and ask. I know we may have touched on this early on, and I don't know if James was there early on, but if you could again, Mark, please just go ahead and just touch on that. What's the best way for small nonprofits? And I guess that's really a key question too, because even in size, like to to the layman, like a nonprofit is a nonprofit, right? But I
That's
guess
right.
is there a difference between small, large, or or is it just based on team size?
It's really about budget size,
Okay.
and it's about the size of the impact that you're making. So there are nonprofit organizations that have an annual operating budget of as small as $250,000 or even smaller than that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are those in the multi millions and
Mm-hmm.
even billions.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but the best way for small nonprofits to effectively raise money is to you start small, set your expectations low. I always say under promise and over deliver.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and as I said earlier, use grants to launch and use individual gifts to sustain.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're starting out, seek out those grants that are out there, and some of them are out there specifically for startups. But as I said earlier, don't just open up the application, fill it out, and send it. Pick up the phone, call that foundation,
Yep.
introduce yourself, and you are going to be much better off when you actually do submit because they're going to remember who you are. The other thing I will add to that is doing as much mass solicitation as you can. So certainly you can use social media, use email, direct mail still works. It still works. The old-fashioned, letter in the mail is, is still king. And so, it costs money, but and particularly when you're trying to do acquisition, because you can actually buy lists, but and it may cost you, I don't know, for sake of discussion, $1,500, and you may only raise $700 or $800, but you may have gotten a $250 gift.
Mm.
You get a $250 gift in the mail, that's not something you ignore.
Right.
Because if somebody gave you $250 and they don't know who you are and they never met you,
Mm-hmm.
there's more there. They're
Right.
basically saying, hey, I'm
Hi.
here.
Right. Right.
Take the steps, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now you start to dig in a little bit and you have a conversation with that person that gave you $250. Now they've given you a gift of 2,500. Now they've paid for your mail, right?
Mm.
That you
True.
lost on. So
True.
people always say, oh, I don't want to do direct mail. You take a hit or it costs too much. But it really is about using all of those efforts to find the nuggets, right, that you can build on to be able to raise those. And I'm going to say something about events too. So this is the other
Okay.
go-to for
Okay.
a lot of small nonprofits is They'll do a lot of events, things like galas, and I always say galas, golf tournaments, um, and grants. Those
Mm-hmm.
seem to be the things that nonprofits go toward. But and that's great. You do a gala, you do a golf tournament, or whatever event you do, and a lot of the times it takes 5, 6, 7 months to plan that event, execute that
Right.
event.
Right.
You get sponsorships, you have to sell tickets, and then you may net after expenses maybe $10,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
exciting, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
pretty good. But sometimes nonprofits miss an opportunity. So they're too busy celebrating the $10,000 that they netted from the event. My question always is, who was in the room that night?
Mm. Mm. Wow.
So if you knew ahead of time who was going to be in the room, which you know because people have to RSVP, and you know that there are people in that room that have capacity, then you need to do seed planting that night. That doesn't mean you're going to be walking around asking people for money, but you're going to walk around and you're going to strategically thank those folks who you know are in the room that have capacity. Thank them for coming. Say, hey, thank you. I really appreciate you coming. I'd love to get together with you for a cup of coffee. Would you be willing to do that? Could I give you a call? Absolutely. Now you're moving through the room and you've planted seeds with 15, 20 people. And now you have 15, 20 people to follow up with. So you got the 10,000 that you
Yep.
netted,
Yep.
and you probably have another $50,000 that you can raise
Yeah.
from the people who were in the room,
Yeah.
right? By
Yep.
beginning to build those relationships. And so we have to leverage, whether it's a golf outing or a gala or whatever, we have to leverage those events to make sure that we're moving through the room, connecting and following up. And I always say, follow up no sooner than 2 days, no later than 10 days. You don't want to lose momentum. You also don't want to follow up from the parking lot, right? So you don't want to be too eager.
Yeah,
So no
definitely.
sooner than two, no later than 10 days, you should follow up and begin to
Man.
develop those relationships that you can convert into gifts because the event is a transactional event,
Yeah.
right? I
Mm-hmm.
paid 150 bucks, I'm going to go play golf, or I pay 150 bucks, I'm going to come to the gala. That's transactional. Yeah, I'm supporting a nonprofit, but I'm getting something out of it. Now you've got to take the transactional and convert it to
Convert
the
it to.
relational.
Mm-hmm.
And so, leveraging those events by talking to people in the room is really important.
Man, look.
What if the,
Yeah, so
yes,
Corey is asking, so what if the ask is not financial, but more about your product or service? Uh, these tips that you're dropping and sharing with everybody tonight, does that apply to all asks? Needing land, in kind services, etc.
absolutely, right? So you could be talking to someone. I'll give you a really good example of this. I worked for a university many years ago, and I was talking to a company that had, um, for lack of a better description, like wiring, all the tech wiring that was needed for a new facility. And if memory serves me correctly, there was like 17 million feet of
Wow.
cable
Jeez.
on this campus um, that needed to be maintained or replaced. And so, in talking with that company, I didn't talk to them about a dollar gift. I
Mm,
talked to them about a gift in kind
right.
of that cable or that wiring, and also the cost to install it. And
Right.
they agreed to do that. And so we valued that gift, right? Because that becomes what we call budget relief, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now you can take that off of the list of things that you have to do for that facility that costs money, and you can credit that donor with the value of that
Right.
gift in kind
Right.
because of what it saved you. So, absolutely, those kinds of things are, and the same process is used to ask for, because that's a significant ask.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That's huge.
you're asking for land, you're asking for services, that has value. And so now you have to have a conversation with that person as to what that value is, and then you can receipt them accordingly based on that. So you thank them. If you have a 501c3, you're thanking them in writing. You're assigning value based on what you discussed, and then it actually becomes between the donor and the IRS after that, right?
After
You've
that.
done your part, and then they go. So I hope that answers that question.
Man, look, Corey, that was a great question. Everybody, thank you, for sharing and asking your questions and just really jumping out there. Um, we're coming up on the hour. And, before we close out the show, if there's anything, Mark, if there is one thing that you can, maybe a listener should take away from this entire conversation, this episode, what would that one thing be?
So one thing is, and I kind of said it earlier, is that you have to remind yourself that when you're asking for money, it's not about the dollars; it's about what the dollars do for the people that you serve. That is the one thing from a philosophical standpoint that you should take away. But there's a practical piece that people need to be aware of, and that is you have to be good with follow up. Follow up is everything because if you're starting a conversation or building a relationship with someone, you said you're going to call them in 2 weeks. You better call them in 2 weeks
Mm,
because if you don't, your credibility is on the line and your organization's credibility is on the line.
wow.
So don't take that for granted. You are taking up people's valuable time to have them listen to you about your mission. So you better take that seriously and follow up when you say you're going to follow up. So you have to be organized. Um, whatever you use to organize calendar lists, whatever that may be. I do have a process that I typically recommend. I'm a big calendar person, so I'm a big fan of what's called block calendaring, so that everything's right in front of me all day, so that I don't miss anything. But that is really, really, really important is the follow up because if you don't follow up when you say you are going to follow up, then you may lose that gift. You may because your credibility you get one opportunity to make a first impression,
Mm,
and you better take advantage of that because you're working not only on behalf of the organization, but on behalf of the people that you are serving, who
yes,
are
indeed.
depending on you to raise those dollars so that their lives can be improved.
Man, look here. All I'm gonna say, is sensational. I don't have any other words for the time spent this evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us. For those of you who are here, if you're new to Two Mics Up, please just take a moment. Go ahead, go down to the bottom, hit the subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up, thumbs down, leave us a comment. Let us know. If you enjoy the show, anything that we can do to improve the show, whatever. We want to hear from you. Constructive criticism it's appreciated. We really want to hear back from you all. Um, you know, Thank you, Kosa. Yeah, tonight's show was definitely fire, pure fire tonight. Our guest was amazing. And before we actually leave, Mark, can you take a few moments? Let our audience know where they can find you, follow you. I dropped your website down in the link, but give them all your social media information so they can follow and support everything that you're doing as well.
Sure, sure. So first thing I would be remiss if I didn't mention, if you are interested in talking with me, you can schedule a free strategy session with me on my website. So if you go to my website, thefundcoach.com, and along the top you will see book a free session. You can do that, and we can hop on a call and talk a little bit specifically about your organization. I'll ask you a few questions, and then I'll be able to determine whether or not I'll be able to help you. So definitely do that. You can find me on most social media platforms at the Fun Coach. That's my Twitter handle. That's my linked. No, that's my Instagram handle. I'm also at Mark at the Fun Coach on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook at the Fun Coach, as well as TikTok. You can find me on TikTok at the Fun Coach. So I'm on most platforms. I do a live stream every Tuesday at 4 o'clock Eastern time. So if you want to hear more of me talking about all things related to relationship fundraising, feel free to join me there. I do that on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook at the same time. So whatever platform, you'll catch me there.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here. Please, like we always talk about on Two Mics Up. I ask that, uh, as Mark, excuse me, said earlier, that it is to serve. And everything that we do here on our platform really is to serve. We want to promote positivity. We want to uplift and enhance our community as best we can. And this gentleman is definitely the epitome of what we look to bring to you each and every week. And at the same time, uh, we're going to go ahead and move with our podcast season that is going to be starting next week, Monday. And you really don't want to miss it. You saw it, Josh Aviv, Spark It Up. Spark Charge is going to be making changes to the electronic vehicle industry. This is a young brother, man, and tonight we're talking about sponsorships and fundraising and things of that nature. This brother, man, he somehow Mark Cuban is in his bag, and I mean, I don't need to say anything else when I say Mark Cuban. If those of y'all who don't know, Google Mark Cuban, and yeah, because this young brother, man, he's doing this thing straight from his dorm room to production.
That's great.
Yeah, it's great development, the whole 9 yards. Tune in Monday, brand new episode, podcast side. You can also watch it here on YouTube. We're on every major streaming platform. Two mics up. One last thing, ladies and gentlemen, before I go, for those of you here in the DMV area, DC, Maryland, and Virginia, uh, save the date October 10th in Lake Ridge. They're putting together a Your Health Matters event. Our friends over at Business Crossing Network. It's going to be interactive and information, free blood pressure checks. You can have a meet and greet. There's going to be panel discussions. It's going to be a whole lot of interactive workshops from 10 a.m. to 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on October 10th here in Lake Ridge. We'll post more information for you. Check it out. Come through. And just get your health checked, man. Your physical health and mental health is really important as we are dealing with this pandemic. Last but not least, may you all stay safe as we are working through this pandemic. And my team is go ahead and throwing me, telling me before I go to throw this up, to book a free strategy session with Mark, as he mentioned. Please go ahead and visit him at www.thefuncoach.com. Book a free session. Man, my English right now. Book a free session. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know a lot of places that you're going to go and get things free consultations and sessions and things. You want to go ahead and book yours today with this gentleman, this amazing guest, Mark. We're going to close out the show like we always do. Thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, like we always do at this time, stay safe, stay blessed. Mike's out.